Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. The finitudes of nature are reciprocally exclusive, because nature most of the time shows it resistance straight away to our freedoms. So if you want to, pass through a wall, for example, it will tell you that you can't do that. You and I are exclusive. You would have to, use force and other things to do violence to nature. Not in the, not so the finitudes of thought, because in thought you can make up things, and its resistance is much weaker and much long term than that of nature, which is in its essential nature incapable of incapable of limitation. Because thought has more room for freedom. As Kant said somewhere, it is in the nature of reason or freedom to transgress all limits. So that's fine. Incapable of limitation and cannot remain imprisoned in the narrow circuit of its own individuality. The thought is fundamentally something general, or something non-specific, non-individualistic. So imprisoned in the narrow circuit of its own individuality. Maybe we can, to talk in this way is already to hypostatize thought. Thought need a thinker. It cannot exist on its own in a way that nature exists, for example, on its own. So in a way, nature is self-subsistent. The thought is not, but in Hegelian and Iqbal's conception, because they hypostatize thought, make it into a substance, thought comes with individuality of its own, or is searching for its individuality. And when they talk about cosmic thought, that's their version of what God is. So that's one of the pitfalls of Hegelian way of thinking, is that you take as substance something which is not a substance, not something self-subsisting. So thought needs a thinker. So thought is more like a power which needs to be used, or a characteristics which needs a substance, etc. In that sense, thought is more like a color. But in Hegelian thought, obviously, that's a huge issue, that they treat something which is not self-subsistent as self-subsistent, and talk as if thought is some sort of a self-subsisting thing, and that's what Iqbal is doing here too. Not so the finitude of thought, which is in its essential nature incapable of limitation and cannot remain imprisoned in the narrow circuit of its own individuality. Yes, it is in the nature of thought that it is free. It has less resistance because it is not something self-subsistent. It doesn't have its own individuality. That's why you can mold it easily. But not having limitations is not something necessarily very nice. And transgressing limitation can create illusions. But Iqbal and Hegel think, especially Iqbal, I think that transgressing limitation is always, sometimes it is a good thing, when we transgress limitations of a particular mode of thought, which claims to be universal, when it is, limited and specific, to show that it's not, and transgression against, oppression and all those things, that is good. But, transgression against the truth, that can be, something not nice. You can get caught into the whirlpool of self-delusion and illusion. Anyway, in the wide world beyond itself, nothing is alien to it. Nothing is alien to it. Because thought can, as something which is easily malleable, it can, and as something which is not self-subsistent, it can subsist in many things, and it can, be molded into many different molds. So in that sense, the world beyond itself, nothing is alien to it. It is in its progressive participation in the life of the apparently alien that thought demolishes the walls of its finitude and enjoys its potential infinitude. And what he means here is, let's talk a bit about it more carefully. Nothing is alien to thought in the sense that it can understand, it can grasp nature, not in its own, obviously. Somebody has to. Sky, sun, social world, cultural world, physical world, etc. So it is in participation in the life of the apparently alien, because generally people have thought that, especially in modern thought, for example, in Cartesian paradigm, there's a dichotomy of matter and mind. Complete dichotomy in the sense that the essence of matter is extension, and essence of mind is thinking, and it's not extended at all. Non-extension in that sense. So then for Descartes, it becomes a huge problem how these two things interact with each other. And that dichotomy in different way is inherited by two streams of Cartesian thought in modern philosophy: empiricism and rationalism. Empiricism, mostly British empiricism, but there's a French element in it as well. Locke, and before Locke, Hobbes as well. Locke and Berkeley and Hume. And Hume was one of the greatest, or the greatest philosopher of this tradition. And rationalism, many people, Descartes' contemporaries and other, Leibniz, for example, and Spinoza is one of the greatest. And then this rationalist tradition was extended by Wolff and his followers. And then came Kant, who tried to synthesize this tradition through his transcendental idealism. And Hegel is basically a disciple of Kant who is reacting against Kant. So when sorry, in the Hegelian concept with which Iqbal is largely working, thought is awakened in a sense. So everything is stationary, perfection, stationary, because everything is as it should be. So there's no movement. So movement is, in a sense, privation in the Hegelian thought, as it is in Aristotelian thought. So you need an explanation for movement, not for stationary, because that's the perfection. Movement is started when thought finds resistance in the matter, and through this resistant thought thinks, and in order to overcome this resistant thought, the movement starts. So that's the explanation of movement. So thought is moving because it found resistance in the matter, alienation in the matter, and through that resistant alienation, thought thinks there's something other than itself. But that's just a partial vision. In its nature, thought wants to. That's what he's saying, overcoming finitude, because of this resistance which it finds in matter. So that's a finitude. That's a limitation. So that's, in order to overcome this finitude, this motion is started. And thought overcome this finitude through understanding matter. So overcoming this matter through its conceptualization of it. So the world history is basically the history of through which thought, the universal thought, and all specific thoughts are expression of that universal thought in this conception. History consists in thought's journey, overcoming this dichotomy, this resistance nature. And there are many attempts, and those attempts are only partially successful, because the resistance never goes away fully. So the end of history, according to Hegel and Iqbal, is when thought is completely. End of history is when thought is going to completely overcome this resistance of nature. Obviously, this is happening in our world through science. And once it is completely overcome resistance of nature, it realizes that nature is the self-expression of this thought, nothing else. And then obviously when resistance is fully vanished, then the movement is vanished and history is vanished. We have end of history. We have some sort of utopia. Hegel thought that utopia was America, going to be America. Hegel's disciple Marx thought that was going to be in his utopia of communism. And Iqbal thought that utopia is going to be some sort of his Muslim New Spain or something. That's Muslim nationalism. So these are all chimeras of thought, because belief in freedom, belief in infinitude, that's just, as I said, transgression. That is what Iblisiyat or Shaitanat or devilish thought is transgression, freedom. But according to the way of the prophets, way of the Abraham, and his sons, both Isaac and Ishmael and his progeny, and the last of them and the best of them, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they taught us non-transgression, ibadat, worship of the Lord of Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are two different thoughts, and Iqbal sort of is Abrahamic, but he's sort of caught into this Hegelian trap because of the imperialism and imperialistic education in which he grew up, and he grew up in the heydays of imperialism, studied in Britain and Germany and all that. So what I'm saying is, when he's talking about infinitude of thought, that's what he's talking about. Obviously, thought has no infinitude. I mean, it has limits of transgression, but from one transgression to another transgression, that's just a movement from finitude to finitude. Because freedom, in this sense, is a great illusion. Freedom, like going beyond limitations. That's an illusion, because we are all limitation. And accepting our limitation is the great wisdom, the wisdom of the ancient saints and the wisdom of the prophets. So that's what he's talking about. It is progressive participation in the life of the apparently alien. The thought demolishes the wall of its finitude and enjoys its potential infinitude. Its movement becomes possible only because of the implicit present in its finite individuality. Just explain this. Implicit presence of the infinite. But as we saw, what is present is not the infinite, this ability to transgress from one limitation to another limitation. And the illusion is that that's ultimately end up in some sort of limitless paradise, which keeps alive within it the flame of aspiration and sustain it in its endless pursuit. Endless, yes, it is endless, pitiless, because it is illusion. It is a mistake to regard thought as inconclusive. I mean, the Hegelian myth, and Iqbal goes with it, is that it will conclude in limitless paradise, and that is Marxist myth as well. Because Hegel has two streams: right Hegelians, that's America, and left Hegelians, that was Soviet Union and all that rubbish, not China. So it is a mistake to regard thought inclusive. So they're trying to make that limitless paradise through trying to overcome nature. But nature fights back, as we see. It is a mistake to regard thought as inconclusive, for it too, in its own way, is a greeting of the finite with the infinite. Misregard the thought as inclusive, for it too, the thought, greeting of finite with the infinite. Infinite is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so thought has no infinitude. It has pretension of infinitude and illusion and transgression, and that's all from Iblis. I think Iqbal himself knows truth, and it is clear in some of his poetry. But here, he is deep into Hegelianism. So we'll stop here today. Stop here, and next time we'll start with sort of a new thought here. So during the last 500 years, he's trying to understand imperialism. Okay.